I always thought that all the important stories in my life began in noisy places. Crowded lecture halls filled with students, bars blasting music, or parties where everyone pretended to be happy. But our story didn't. It started on a very quiet afternoon, right after school had ended, and I stood alone in the university campus, clutching my freshly printed diploma that still smelled of new paper. My name is Chris. For years of college flew by so fast that I hadn't even figured out who I'd become. The familiar red brick buildings, the lawns where students sprawled out reading books, the coffee shop on the corner where I'd pulled all-nighters for assignments. They were all still there, but I knew I was about to leave. Everything was ending. And right then, something else began. I heard my name being called from behind. Chris. The voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. I turned around. Jake was standing a few steps away, wearing his familiar gray hoodie, hands in his pockets, the afternoon sun casting a warm golden glow on his light brown hair. Jake always appeared like that. Not loud, not showy, but he made everything around him seem to slow down. "You're not heading home yet?" Jake asked, stepping closer. "I'm thinking about where to go next." I smiled lightly, trying to seem casual. "What about you?" "Same as you." We stood side by side, shoulders almost touching. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees, the birds perched on the library roof. The silence between me and Jake always had something unique about it. Not awkward, but not entirely carefree either. Jake and I met in our freshman year. We were in the same modern American literature class, sitting at the back table, and we skipped one session together to grab burgers at midnight. We became friends faster than I expected, but it took me a long time to realize I felt more than that. There were nights I'd lie in my dorm bed, staring at the stark white ceiling, thinking about Jake's eyes when he smiled, the way he tilted his head when listening to someone. I'd wonder, if one day I held his hand a little longer, would everything change? But I never dared to try. "Got any plans for the summer?" Jake asked, breaking my train of thought. "I'll go home for a bit, maybe intern in Chicago." I hesitated. "You?" "I'm staying here," Jake replied. "Got a research project." "Plus." "I'm not ready to leave yet." I looked at him. There was something in Jake's voice that tightened my chest. Like he was clinging to these last days just like me. "Chris," Jake continued, softer this time. "You free tonight?" My heart beat a little faster. "Yeah." "Why?" "I want to take a walk. Around the lake. Like back in sophomore year." I nodded, maybe a bit too quickly. "Sure." The lake was behind the campus, where the lights reflected on the water in shimmering ripples. We'd been there many times, talking about classes, the future, things we'd never tell anyone else. But tonight felt different. I sensed it as soon as we started walking. Jake was quiet for a long time. I didn't ask. I just walked beside him, feeling the familiar rhythm of our steps, the faint scent of soap from his shirt when the breeze blew lightly. "Chris," Jake finally spoke, "do you ever think, after everything ends, what really remains?" I thought for a moment. "I think it's the people you don't want to forget." Jake stopped. He turned to me. The distance between us was so close. I could see the lake lights reflected in his eyes. "Then," Jake said, his voice trembling slightly, "I don't want you to forget me." My throat went dry. Deep down, I knew this moment wasn't just friendship anymore. Not after the way Jake looked at me. Not after the warmth spreading through me from just one sentence. "I won't," I replied, and that was the truth. Jake reached out, hesitated for a second, then took my hand. For the first time, the grip wasn't rushed, not possessive, but enough to make all the walls I'd built over 4 years crumble in silence. When school ended, our story began like that. And I had no idea that behind that simple moment lay all the love, desire, hurt, and intimacy I was about to face. With Jake, and with myself. After that night, nothing went back to normal. And the scariest part wasn't that Jake had held my hand, but that I didn't want to let go. We didn't say anything more about the moment by the lake. No clear confessions, no definitions. But from that day on, Jake started appearing in my life differently, Closer, deeper, and more dangerous. The next morning, I woke up to his text. "You up? Want to grab breakfast?" I stared at the phone screen for a long time before replying. My heart raced as if just one message was enough to throw me off balance. Yeah, usual spot. The small diner near the dorm was the same. Wooden tables, strong coffee smell, old indie songs playing softly. But I wasn't. I sat across from Jake, trying not to stare too long at his lips when he spoke, trying not to remember the feeling of his hand gently squeezing mine last night. Jake looked tense too. He stirred his coffee endlessly, his eyes occasionally glancing at me before quickly looking away. "Last night," Jake started, then stopped. I held my breath. "What about last night?" I asked, my voice lower than usual. Jake took a deep breath. "I don't regret it." Those words hit me right in the chest. "Neither do I," I replied almost immediately. Jake looked at me for a long time then. "No smile. No avoidance." Just looking, as if he was trying to read all the things I'd never dared to say. "Chris," Jake said softly, "I've thought about you more than a friend should." I swallowed. "How long?" "Longer than I dare to admit." That answer made me feel both relieved and pained. Relieved because I wasn't alone. Pained because of all the years we'd been silent beside each other. From that day, we started seeing each other more often. No longer two buddies hanging out, but unnamed dates. Grocery shopping together late at night, standing side by side picking out the smallest things. Sitting on Jake's apartment couch, watching movies neither of us really paid attention to. The touches changed too. At first, just knees brushing knees. Then shoulders leaning on shoulders. Then one time, when I was laughing at a silly line in the movie, Jake raised his hand, very slowly, and placed it on my wrist. I didn't pull away. His hand was warm and trembling. Jake looked at me, waiting, as if just one no from me would stop everything. But I didn't say it. I just turned to face him, the distance between us only inches. "Chris," Jake whispered, "if I cross this line, will you regret it?" I shook my head. "I think I've regretted enough already." Our first kiss wasn't like anything I'd imagined. Not intense. Not perfect. Jake's lips touched mine so gently, as if he was afraid to break me. But that was enough to make my whole body heat up, my heart pounding wildly. I kissed back. We kissed like two people who'd waited too long. Slowly, awkwardly, but full of desire. When Jake rested his forehead against mine, our breaths mingling, I realized I was shaking. "I like you," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "Not just like. I want to be with you." I closed my eyes for a second. "Jake, I'm leaving soon. Chicago isn't close." "I know." Jake smiled sadly. "That's what scares me the most." The days after passed in a fragile happiness. We lived like we were in stolen time between ending and beginning. By day, I prepared for my new life. By night, I was in Jake's arms, listening to his heartbeat, wondering if this love was strong enough to bridge the distance. One evening, as we lay beside each other, Jake suddenly asked, "If I said I love you, what would you do?" I opened my eyes, staring at the ceiling. That question was heavier than anything I'd ever heard. "I'd be scared," I said honestly, "but I wouldn't run away." Jake squeezed my hand tighter. "That's enough." But deep down I knew the fear hadn't gone away. It was just waiting for a moment of weakness to rise. And that moment was coming very soon. Summer arrived faster than I thought. The campus gradually emptied, familiar faces disappearing one by one, as if someone was quietly erasing part of my memories. Every time I saw Jake, I became more aware that our time was counting down. Jake was different. He didn't talk much about the day I'd leave, but I felt it in his small gestures, the way he held my hand tighter when we walked together, the way he kissed me longer each goodbye, as if afraid a short kiss wouldn't be enough to keep me. We started sleeping over more often, not just out of desire, but out of the need to be close. Some nights we just lay beside each other, Jake's arm around my waist, his nose buried in my neck, breathing as if that was the only way to be sure I was still there. "Do you ever think you'll change?" Jake asked me one night, his voice hazy with sleep. Change how? When you get to Chicago. When you have a different life. I was silent. New city, new job, new people, all waiting for me. But Jake didn't belong to that future. At least not in my initial thoughts. I don't want to become someone you don't recognize anymore, I said. But I also don't know who I'll become. Jake nodded slightly. I'm just afraid. I'll become your past. Those words made my heart ache. Jake wasn't one to show vulnerability easily. He always seemed calm, mature, like everything was under control. But with me, those defenses gradually fell. And I knew I was holding a very fragile part of him. The day I started packing, Jake came to help. We folded clothes in silence, old t-shirts, books we'd read together. Each item packed into boxes was a reminder that I was really leaving. Will you miss this room? Jake asked, trying to sound light. I'll miss you, I replied. Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That evening, we stayed at Jake's apartment. No big lights on, just the dim glow from the desk lamp. No one talked about tomorrow. No one talked about the upcoming distance. We just stayed together, as if not naming the fear would make it not exist. Jake kissed me first. A deep, slow kiss carrying all the things he didn't say. I kissed back, pulling him closer, feeling every breath, every heartbeat. That was the first time we truly belonged to each other. No ruse, no Daphnis. Just trust and the desire to be seen, touched, understood. Jake whispered my name like a prayer. I responded by holding him tight, as if letting go would make him disappear. Afterward, we lay beside each other for a long time. Jake turned his back to me but still held my hand tightly, fingers intertwined. Chris, he said, his voice hoarse. Promise me one thing? What? Don't turn me into a memory you never mention. I pulled him back to face me, looking straight into his eyes. You're not a memory. You're my present. Jake closed his eyes, his forehead touching mine. Then, don't forget to call me. I smiled sadly. I will. Every day if needed. But both of us knew promises are much easier than reality. The day I left school, Jake saw me off at the bus station. No long goodbyes, just a tight, long hug. Go, Jake said, his voice breaking, before I change my mind. I boarded the bus, sitting by the window. As it started moving, I saw Jake standing there, getting smaller, then disappearing from view. For the first time, I understood what loss felt like, even when you haven't truly lost yet. And I had no idea that our biggest challenge was still ahead. Chicago welcomed me with skyscrapers and a pace that waited for no one. Everything moved so fast I barely had time to breathe. Internship by day, extra classes at night, networking events where everyone talked about the future like it could be scheduled. Only Jake didn't fit into that rhythm. In the first weeks, I called him every night. We talked about the smallest things. Jake told me about his research project, a new coffee shop near school, the stray cat that often sat outside his apartment. I told him about Chicago, the crowded subways, the air-conditioned office cold, the feeling of being lost in a city too big. You okay? Jake always asked before hanging up. Yeah, I always replied. But the truth was more complicated. There were nights I'd lie alone in my small rented room, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, missing Jake so much my chest hurt. I missed the way he breathed in his sleep, his low chuckle, even our silences that once made me feel safe. But as time passed, things started to change. I got busier. So did Jake. The nightly calls became every other day, then 2-3 days. When we talked, I realized I wasn't sharing everything anymore. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know where to start. Jake was the same. You've been quieter lately, Jake said in a video call. The screen lagged a bit, his face blurring slightly. I'm used to it, he replied. Or are you getting used to not having me? That question stopped me. It's not that. Then what is it? Jake asked, and for the first time, I heard clear tension in his voice. I didn't answer right away, and that silence spoke for me. We started arguing over small things, because I forgot to call, because Jake accused me of short replies, because distance turned every misunderstanding into a deeper cut than usual. Once, Jake said, "I feel like I'm holding on to someone who's not here anymore." I replied, maybe too coldly, "I'm trying to build a future." Jake laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "What about me? Am I in that future?" I couldn't answer. After that call, we didn't talk for a week. A week of silence can feel longer than a year when you love someone. I thought about calling Jake dozens of times, but each time I picked up the phone, I put it down. I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of hearing what I wasn't ready to face. And deep down, I was afraid Jake might say what I'd been avoiding, that this love was hurting us both. Jake called first. "Chris," he said, his voice low and tired. "Do you miss me?" The question was simple yet cruel. "I do," I said, and this time, I hid nothing in my voice. "Then why do I feel like I'm losing you?" I closed my eyes. "Because I'm changing." "And I'm not," Jake asked. "I'm waiting for you every day." We were silent. I heard Jake's breathing over the phone, heavy and shaky. "I don't want to be the one holding you back," Jake said. "But I don't know how to let go either." Those words broke me. A few weeks later, I went back to school. Unannounced. I stood in front of Jake's apartment, my heart pounding so hard I thought he could hear it from inside. When the door opened, Jake was there, thinner, eyes tired, but still my Jake. "Chris?" He froze. I didn't say anything. I just pulled him into my arms. Jake stood still for a second, then hugged me tight, as if all the pent-up emotions finally found release. "You scared the hell out of me," Jake whispered. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you." Jake looked at me for a long time. "But you don't want to lose yourself either." I nodded. "And that's what scares me the most." We sat together all night, saying the things we'd hidden for too long. No perfect solutions, no sure promises, just the truth, that we loved each other, and that love sometimes isn't enough to make everything easy. When dawn came, Jake held my hand. "Our story isn't over, right?" he asked. I squeezed his hand. "I don't want it to end here." But both of us knew, to reach an ending, we'd have to go through a lot more hurt. I stayed 2 more days. 2 short days, but enough to bring up all the buried emotions in me, without time to hide them. Jake and I didn't pretend everything was fine. We walked around the old campus, the familiar paths where we'd once been 2 clueless students about the future. Everything looked smaller in memory, or maybe we'd grown up too fast. "Remember this spot?" Jake asked, pointing to the wooden bench near the library. "I used to think if I sat here long enough, I'd figure out who I am." I smiled lightly. Jake looked at me. "And have you?" I shook my head. "But I know who I love." Jake didn't say anything. He just sat down, patting the spot next to him. He sat, shoulders touching. A familiar touch, but this time carrying so many unresolved things. On the last night, we lay beside each other like the first time, but the feeling was different. No longer burning desire, but a quiet fear of loss. "Chris," Jake said, his voice low and slow, "if one day you realize the life you want doesn't have me in it, will you tell me?" That question hurt so much I had to breathe deeply to answer. "I promise," I said. "And if you feel like you're waiting too long, you have to tell me too." Jake nodded. "I don't want to love you in silence anymore." The next morning I left again, but this time was different. Not because I was sure about the future, but because I accepted that I wasn't sure about anything. The following months were a series of challenges. Some days we talked a lot, laughing like there was no distance. Some weeks we barely connected, each caught in our own lives. But unlike before, we didn't disappear from each other. We learned to speak out, even if awkwardly, even if it hurt. I went back a few more times. Jake visited me in Chicago too. We started to understand that our love didn't need to be like perfect stories to have value. It just needed to be real enough. A year after graduation, I faced a big decision. A long-term job in Chicago, or moving back near where Jake lived. I called Jake. "If I come back," I asked, heart pounding, "will you be scared?" Jake was silent for a moment. "I'm always scared, but I want to try." A few months later, I packed my things, this time not to run away, but to choose. Jake waited for me at the airport, his familiar smile, eyes still warm like the first day he called my name in the campus. We hugged for a long time. We might not know all the answers, Jake said softly, but at least we're going together. I rested my forehead against his, smiling. Our story began when school ended, and I think it'll continue for a long time, because some loves aren't born in classrooms, but grow after everything seems to have ended. And that's our story.